Child skeleton in Sweden. The Swedish island of Öland is a popular vacation destination due to its exceptional environment and warm temperature. But little do visitors know that the same island was once home to a 1,500-year-old murder scene, otherwise known as the Sandy Borg Massacre. There's a lot of uncertainty and speculation around this dark incident, and the details of the massacre remain unknown to this day. But in 2014, the discovery of a child's bones created a link to the past. During the first investigations of Sandy Borg, archaeologists discovered the ruins of a tiny village. Among the rubble, the remains of 10 individuals were uncovered. It's believed that many more bodies could be buried nearby. What could have caused the slaughter? 2 people were also discovered lying close to the entrance of a cabin, as though they had been murdered while trying to escape. According to the findings, the place has been abandoned for almost 1,500 years. Even valuables like golden brooches and jewelry were all left at the site and discovered in 2010 after another excavation attempt. Archaeologists also say the area could have been turned into a forbidden zone years ago after the slaughter, with residents too frightened to return. After all, who would want to go back to that hellhole? According to one interpretation, the slaughter was linked to a drop in Roman gold around the same period. Did trading have any connection with this brutal event? We have yet to find out. Only 3% of the fort has been unearthed so far, and the archaeological team is currently seeking funding to continue their work. Perhaps one of you could sponsor this project. Are you interested? The Venice Vampire Skull. While excavating a mass grave dating back to the Middle Ages on an island near Venice, archaeologists found a strange skull. Not any other skull. It was the skull of a vampire. It had its mouth wide open, with a large slab of rock or a brick forced into its mouth. It was so far back that the jaw was broken. Here's a little backstory to this unusual finding. Female vampires were often blamed for spreading the dreadful plague epidemic throughout Europe. Wedging a rock or brick into the mouth of a suspected vampire was considered as an effective way of preventing it from feeding on the bodies of other plague victims, and in turn, rising from the grave to attack the living. After researchers dived into the history of the skull, they finally learned that it belonged to an elderly woman who had lived well past the normal age of that time, and she was estimated to be between 60 to 71 years old. People in that time usually did not live that long. After her death, it's thought that the people who buried her decided to jam a brick in her mouth, which was often done to bodies people thought could come back as vampires. While the lady probably just lived a healthier life than most, the people around weren't taking any chances. The thought that plague victims might also be vampires arose, because blood often dribbled from the mouths of those who died from the disease. It is now believed that she could have also been a witch. This is due to the fact that scientists know that no one really lived past the age of 40 during those times, and anyone who did were thought to have practiced witchcraft in order to extend their life and ultimately cheat death. A year after the excavation, the investigators started looking deeper into who this vampire was and why people may have suspected her of dabbling in the dark arts, and even what she might have looked like. It gained so much interest that The Vampire of Venice got her own documentary in the National Geographic series, Mysterious Science, entitled Vampire Forensics. Victims preserved in bogs. Bog bodies are extremely well preserved, and these ancient corpses have been discovered all over northwestern Europe. Bogs mean wetlands, which are found in regions with a temperate climate. The skin of the bog bodies turn into a dark, leathery texture, and their hair turns red from the acidic water and lack of oxygen. Occasionally, the clothing is preserved, and any weapons or ornaments stay with the body. Violently killed thousands of years ago, the bog bodies can be found in various states. Some are merely skeletons and can only reveal a limited amount of information to probing scientists. Others are partially preserved and may still hold some clues as to who they were or how they died. The owners of these bodies sometimes met death in a violent manner and were thrown into the bog. Archaeologists examined the works of a Roman historian from the 1st century AD, where he wrote that the Germans killed weaklings and homosexuals and disposed of the bodies in bogs. Researchers formed the opinion that, rather than weaklings, many of these people were convicted criminals, punished by agonizing torture and execution. More typical was the Iron Age funerary custom of cremation. The Windaby girl, discovered in a German bog in 1952, was assumed to be an adulteress who was drowned along with her paramour. However, on further investigation of the bodies, they discovered that they were both male and that the other body had been deposited into the bog almost 300 years before the Windaby girl. One of the best preserved bodies found in a bog was discovered in 1952 in an area northwest of Copenhagen. Modern research shows they died at the age of 34 and was sacrificed more than 2,000 years ago. Human sacrifice was common at the time and often followed a natural disaster such as a flood or a destructive storm. According to primitive beliefs, such a disaster was a sign that the gods were angry and a sacrifice was needed to appease them. No one knows for sure how many bog people have been uncovered in the past. Today, documented discoveries of bog bodies number around 700. There are probably many more left undiscovered. Who knows what we may learn about them in the future? When it concerns the bog bodies, archaeologists and anthropologists have redefined their roles as crime scene investigators. Skeleton Lake in India. The Himalayas are beautiful and quite the hotspot for hikers with a taste for adventure. Looking at the calm, snow-covered scenery near Rupkund Lake, you could never guess that this small water body has acquired the name of the Skeleton Lake. Most outdoorsy people that come here have no clue about the lake nestled in the mountain range that has taken over 800 lives. The edges of the lake are lined with human remains. You can spot bones and frozen bodies on warmer days. Some of the bodies even have hair and flesh still attached. Some mountaineers across the lake have even stacked the bones into shrines. On rare and hot summer days, when parts of the icy lake melts, bones float up to the surface. An anthropologist named William Sachs visited the place back in 1978 and said, "It's a small enclosed space, and there are bones everywhere." But there's something else mysterious about the lake, other than the numerous skeletons. No one knows how they got there. Researchers ran a study on 38 skeletons that revealed 3 genetically distinct groups had died at about 1,000 years apart. The first bones were discovered in 1942, and now, decades later, researchers still don't have an answer. Tombs of warrior women in Russia. The Amazon warriors of Greek mythology were thought to be legendary beings. They were a tribe of female fighters and hunters that had unmatched physical capabilities, but this legend might be based in truth. Recently, remains of women buried with swords, horse riding equipment, and other items were discovered. In the year 2019, archaeologists led by Valery Gulyayev reported the findings of a 2,500-year-old tomb where 4 females were laid to rest together. They originated from a nomadic culture known as the Scythians and were discovered in one of the 19 burial sites found in western Russia. The youngest in the tomb was between the ages of 12 and 13 only. The first 2 were in their 20s, while the third was in their 50s. Interestingly enough, women soldiers were the norm rather than the exception in Scythian society. The adolescents and one of the young women's graves were plundered, but the other 2 were not. The eldest woman wore a gold hat with etched designs, an artifact that is actually the region's first of its kind. They also found an iron blade with a rare forked arrowhead buried alongside the elderly woman. The burial was finished in early fall, around the 4th century BC. A bronze mirror, 2 arrows, and a glass bead bracelet were discovered in the other woman's grave, which had been left untouched. She was actually buried in a position as if she was riding a horse for all eternity. The Scythians were tiny tribes that were known to mainly use bows and arrows in battle. We now know that they were some gutsy people that could have been the inspiration for the Amazonians of mythology. Screaming mummies. Bodies which are buried in the deep for thousands of years may be found in different states and stages of decomposition or fossilization. After you have unearthed the body, everything looks rather normal, except for the fact that the corpse looks like it is screaming. This has been a recurring experience for archaeologists throughout history, and some believe that the bodies would have met disturbing ends. Mummification in ancient Egypt was performed using clearly defined routines and religious rituals. However, an unidentified mummy found in 1881 had not been prepared in accordance with custom. When its body was unwrapped in 1886, archaeologists found themselves confronted with the horrific, gaping maw of a face contorted in a scream. The mummy was in a sarcophagus that did not bear any name or identifying marks. Unable to proceed further, he was called as Unknown Man E and restored in the Cairo Museum. One look at the body, and you will be having nightmares for quite a while. Over 100 years later, a team of Egyptologists, accompanied by National Geographic, reopened the case of Unknown Man E, who became known as the Screaming Mummy. The mummy's identity was rigorously researched because of his startling appearance. However, most Egyptologists agree that the gruesome visage is merely the result of the deceased head falling backwards after death. archaeologists intend to conduct a DNA test to confirm the familial connection between the unknown man E and Ramesses III. Do you think mummies scream? Maybe it just lost its voice? We don't have any definite answers to these questions yet. The screaming mummies will undoubtedly continue to inspire journalists and documentary scriptwriters and many more. How do we know they aren't singing? Decapitated skeletons. During a construction project in York, England in 2004, workers discovered mysterious skeletons. The most gruesome part of the discovery was their decapitated heads buried with them, sometimes on their chests and sometimes between the legs or feet. Their bodies showed clear signs of brutal injuries that might have been related to violence in battles. After struggling for over a decade to find some sort of explanation for the condition of the bodies, in 2016, scientists finally solved the mystery. It revealed just how Romanized Britain had become, and also gave evidence about the lives of Roman gladiators. Out of the 80 skeletons, 7 were chosen to be thoroughly studied. Scientists found that the skeletons did indeed belong to gladiators, although they could have also been soldiers or criminals before. The men were all taller than average, which fits the theory of them being in the military, since there was minimum requirement height in the Roman army. One of the skeletons was of Middle Eastern origin. The man grew up in the region of modern-day Palestine, Jordan or Syria, and migrated to the British Isles where he died. It shows how cosmopolitan the Roman Empire was. 800 mammoth bones in Mexico. Archaeologists uncovered the largest ever finding of mammoth bones in 2019. But here is what makes this find really interesting. They also found the first ever human-made mammoth trap. It's an 800-bone treasure from at least 14 ancient giants located in central Mexico. They're thought to be one of the world's most significant discoveries of its kind. The skeleton remains were discovered at Talltanic, a municipality in Mexico. Some of the creatures even exhibited evidence that they were being hunted. At least 5 mammoth herds were found in the region of the discovery, according to researchers. Mexico has already been the site of unexpected mammoth finds. When you think of Mexico, your first thought probably isn't woolly mammoths. Workers in the 1970s had unearthed a mammoth carcass on the capital's north side. The discovery also revealed the bones of a horse and camel species that had previously vanished from the Americas. Based on these fossilized discoveries, we can assess the history of the planet and the different stages of evolution that have led to our world today. Pits full of heads. The villagers of China, for decades, believed that the crumbling of rock jade pieces shaped into blades, discs, near their homes were from the Great Wall of China, which was very common along the area. Suspicions grew among the locals as jade was only available at about 1,000 miles away from the area. When a team of Chinese archaeologists came to investigate the rubble, they started unearthing the area and found that the stones weren't a part of the Great Wall, but were the ruins of a magnificent fortress city. The digging revealed a 230 feet high pyramid surrounded by more than 6 miles of protective walls and an inner sanctum containing jade artifacts, painted murals, and gruesome evidence of human sacrifice. The archaeologists had dug up 70 stunning stone sculptures, which were figurines of monsters, serpents, and half-human beasts resembling Bronze Age iconography of China. The site has been named Shimao. It seems Shimao flourished for nearly half a millennium in that remote region, and then suddenly it disappeared. Shimao is forcing historians to rethink the origin of the Chinese civilization. Toothy tumor. Researchers found a 1,600-year-old skeleton of a woman in an necropolis in Spain. Finding a centuries-old withering skeleton is morbid enough, but what they found in her pelvis was even more shocking. She was Roman and in her 30s when she died. She was surprisingly well preserved, and because of this, the cause of her death was as well. Archaeologists found a calcified rock-like object in her pelvis with teeth attached to it. What the heck? Was it an animal living in her body or a fetus? Turns out the woman was suffering from an ovarian terteratoma. It is a tumor that occurs in the ovaries. The tumor in her body was 1.7 inches in diameter. The tumors come from germ cells, which then form human eggs, which create bone, teeth, and hair, among other structures. Though such tumors are usually harmless, in her case, it might have been the cause of her death. It could have caused an internal infection or disturbances in the adjacent organs. This is one of the oldest cases of teratoma to ever be found. There are no records of how this disorder might have affected her body. From the tiles used in her burial, researchers concluded that she belonged to a lower class status, since she wasn't a royal or anybody influential. Sadly, there are no written records of her ordeal. Hesington brain. A 2,600-year-old human brain was discovered in York, still intact. During investigations in the Hesington region back in 2008, a brain from the Iron Age was found. It is said to be among the oldest discoveries in the United Kingdom, dating around 673 to 482 BC. Scientists were initially interested in how the fragile tissue had remained intact. It had been thousands of years. So how had it stayed the same? The only soft tissue left in the skull was indeed the brain matter. Those are some remarkable findings, but the pictures are quite disturbing to look at. Researchers spent a year unraveling the densely packed proteins that kept the brain tissue in a fixed condition and found that it still had many of the characteristics of normal living brain tissue. The University College London (UCL) researchers discovered that the chemicals that keep a human brain together, particularly proteins, can fold tightly into extremely stable structures called aggregates. Brains often disintegrate fast after death due to a rapid autolysis process, which involves enzymes breaking down the tissue. According to findings, an acidic fluid may have entered the brain and blocked autolysis, or cell suicide basically, which explains its well-preserved state. Scientists believe that the manner of this person's death or burial must have been harsh, allowing the brain to be preserved for such a long time. Who would have thought brains could last so long? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. The Lloyds carpalite. The Lloyds carpalite, one of the weirdest discoveries from the Viking Age, is unlike any other find from that time. The weird fossil is, strangely enough, human feces. It is over 8 inches long and 2 inches thick. It is one of the largest human feces ever discovered. It's not hard to feel sorry for the person who squeezed this out. It was densely packed, so much so that it fossilized, instead of rotting like normal feces would. Now we can all stare at it and wince with sympathy for the poor person who created it. But here is what further research into this blob of excreta revealed. It contained hundreds of eggs belonging to the whipworm, a parasitic worm which lives in the large intestine. Finds like these are incredibly important because it gives us details into the Viking diet. From this fossil, we understand that whoever created it lived on a diet largely made up of pollen grains and cereal bran, which they would have eaten in the form of bread and porridge. The fossil is named after the place it was discovered, and isn't some weird corporate branding exercise. But there's not much known about the person who left it behind, except their diet was rich. The fossil is now on display in the Jorvik Viking Centre, UK. Whether the carpalite can be valued as a treasure is a question that has remained for ages. Remnants of a witch hunt. The witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts are known as one of the most gruesome cases of witch hunting in history. But much before the people of Salem were burning innocent people at the stakes, it was a practice which was already going on in Europe. Witch hunts are still seeped into the minds of the people of Aberdeen, Scotland. But it wasn't a hunt with mobs and pitchforks. The hunts were more organized than that. The prisons used for the witches still stand as testimony to the atrocious acts commissioned by the royals themselves. Inside of a 15th century chapel in Aberdeen, there's an iron ring embedded into a stone pillar that may not look like much, but historians assume it could be connected to a witch hunting from the past. The towering steeple of the kirk and the stone vaulted chapel of St. Mary was established as a prison for the witches awaiting trial. In 1597, 23 women and 1 man were accused of witchcraft during Aberdeen's Great Witch Hunt. Since the hunts were carried out as per the orders of the king, Aberdeen has extensive written records of the practice, including orders to the local blacksmiths for welding iron rings and shackles meant to imprison the accused witches. The accused were first strangled to death before being burned in front of large crowds of onlookers. Have you heard of the stories of the witch hunts that took place in Salem, Massachusetts? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. A Roman woman with an ovarian teratoma. In 2013, archaeologists discovered the body of a Roman lady with a tumor in her pelvis, along with 4 malformed teeth. Researchers thought the 30-year-old lady died 1600 years ago and was buried in a cemetery near Lleida, Spain's Catalonia province. An autopsy found she died of an ovarian teratoma, a Greek term that loosely translates to monstrous swelling in the ovaries. These tumors are caused by abnormalities in the germ cells that produce human eggs. These can grow hair, teeth, and bone, as well as more complicated organs like eyes. These tumors can be extremely deadly. This is possibly the first time researchers have found teratomas in ancient human bones. Despite its horrific contents, the researchers speculate that the unusual tumor, which measures approximately 1.7 inches in diameter, may have never given the lady any symptoms. However, since the growth of teratomas results in displacement of surrounding organs, they say it's also conceivable that it was the final reason for her premature death. The tumor wouldn't have been visible from the outside, and experts can't say for sure what effect it had on the lady. Lead researcher Nuria Armentano had said, "We suppose that, at least during a long part of her life, she was completely unaware of this tumor. The tumor's owner lived in an era when the Roman Empire was rapidly fading as barbarian invaders poured in from the north, eventually conquering France, Spain, and other regions." The Black Sarcophagus. A mysterious black granite sarcophagus, which is approximately 2,000 years old, was discovered in Alexandria, Egypt. The discovery further announced that the massive coffin held the remains of Alexander, and that opening the sealed and foreboding-looking box would unleash a curse. When opened, the sarcophagus was found to contain only the remains of 3 Egyptian army officers and a reddish-brown sewage liquid. One of the skeletons shows signs of an arrow injury, suggesting the 3 may have died in battle. The exact age of the skeletons is unclear. No inscriptions or works of art have been found on the outside or inside of the sarcophagus so far. It's also unclear what artifacts, if any, were buried with the skeletons. The sarcophagus was nearly 9 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 6 feet tall. The sarcophagus was never opened after it was buried in Alexandria. The opening of the sarcophagus creates a series of new mysteries for Egyptologists. Who were these 3 people? When exactly did they live? What killed them? Why were they buried in such a giant sarcophagus? What were they buried with? And how did so much liquid sewage get into the sarcophagus? Do we know all these answers yet? Unfortunately, no. But scientists are working towards uncovering some hidden truths. Archaeologists believe that it could date back to sometime between 304 BC and 30 BC, a time when the descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals ruled Egypt. Mummified lung. Forrest Gump said, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." Well, opening a sarcophagus comes with its own slice of mystery. You really never know what you're gonna get. Most likely, it will be an ancient mummy. But sometimes, curses are unleashed, or strange artifacts hidden inside are found. Just like this one, where a sarcophagus was found in the site where the kings of France have been buried for centuries. In 1959, when archaeologists found a stone sarcophagus in the Basilica of Saint Denis, Paris, they were sure to find skeletal remains inside. They were right, but it wasn't the only thing they found. The entire body had decayed and withered away, except for one organ that remained preserved for thousands of years. It contained a well-preserved lung, along with a strand of hair, some jewelry, and several fragments of textiles and leather. But how did one lung survive the fury of time, while the rest of the body didn't? This discovery has baffled archaeologists for decades. An inscription on a gold ring that was found with the remains that said Arnagundis, etched around a monogram that meant Regine, revealed that the skeleton belonged to the Merovingian queen Arnagundi, one among the 6 wives of King Clotaire I, 511 to 561, and the mother of King Chilperic I. After years of research, scientists found the reason behind her mummified lung. Based on the plant compounds present in her lungs, Queen Arnagundi might have been injected with an embalming liquid, which eventually pooled in her lungs. On conducting a biopsy, a high concentration of copper deposits was also found in the lungs. It appears like, apart from the embalming fluid, the copper belt she was wearing when she was buried helped preserve the organ due to the antimicrobial and preserving properties of copper. Oldest cheese in Egyptian tomb. In Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists discovered an ancient inedible product. Do you know what the product was? The world's most aged firm cheese. It was originally discovered in 1885, but became lost until 2010, when it appeared again. Archaeologists discovered shattered jars at the location a few years earlier. A hardened white substance was found in one jar, as well as a canvas fabric that could have been used to seal the jar. The scientists isolated the sample's protein components after dissolving them and analyzed them. They found that the relic came from either a cow or a goat, The absence of additional identifiers and the features of the canvas fabric showed that the dairy product was, in actuality, hard cheese. Scientists have warned that cheese may be laden with live germs, causing anybody who's brave enough to try it to become unwell. Come to think of it, could cheese be used as a weapon of murder? Maybe, maybe not. The very first leper. When archaeologists were digging in India, they found something startling. Archaeologist experts usually find various traces of where life once was, but rarely do they come across something so rare as a disease like this. They discovered evidence of leprosy in a skeleton that was 4,000 years old. It was not only the oldest skeleton that's been found, but it was with traces of leprosy. It was also the first case of leprosy found in India. Leprosy is very difficult to trace and study. While leprosy is curable now, there was no treatment for the disease 4,000 years ago, and lepers were often ostracized by their communities. The investigations have shed light on how the disease might have spread in early human history. Historical sources support an initial spread of the illness from Asia to Europe, with Alexander the Great's army behaving as the vector. After 400 BC, the newly discovered skeleton was buried around 2000 BC in Rajasthan, India, at the site of Balathal. Though it is no longer a significant public health threat in most parts of the world, leprosy is still one of the least understood infectious diseases, buried with the husband's heart. Even death couldn't part these two lovers from the 17th century. In 2013, a site in Rennes, where the Jacobin convent once stood, was chosen for the construction of a convention center. On stumbling upon a lead coffin, the archaeologists were soon called upon to look further into the peculiar discovery. On opening it, they found an unusually well-preserved body, to the extent of the leathery shoes and religious cloaks still being intact. What makes this discovery extraordinary is a rare yet eerie romantic gesture that it has held onto for all these years. The identity of the deceased was confirmed after looking through the Covenant's burial registry. Louise de Quengo, Lady of Brefayac, was buried at the site in the year 1656, but even in death, she chose to remain with her husband. While being buried next to each other has been a common tradition worldwide, this French noblewoman's casket contained something that archaeologists had never seen before. Along with her mummified body, archaeologists found a small heart-shaped container made of lead, which enclosed the heart of Toussaint de Perrien, the Knight of Brefayac, her husband. In the pre-revolutionary era of France, buying organs separately for either political or religious purposes was common. But it was the first time researchers saw the tradition being followed to preserve love. According to a recent study on the emergence of modern burial practices in Europe, this discovery is not only romantic, but also a scientific phenomenon that has never been seen before in archaeology. The inscription etched on the urn revealed that the knight's body was buried around 125 miles away in a Carmelite convent that he had founded. A CT scan found that even Louise's heart was missing. Maybe the lovers had planned on an exchange of heart before they died? Unfortunately, the husband's grave still has been found to prove the theory. Till then, this find will continue to be labeled as a romantic expression, to be reunited much after death. Headless Pompei victim. A shocking find from 79 AD tells the truth about what happened to one unlucky guy. He was the definition of the wrong place at the wrong time. During the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, a man's skull was apparently smashed by a large rock just as he left Pompeii. His head was later discovered, along with the rock. The open-mouthed skull was found alongside the man's body back in 2018. The discovery refutes their earlier assumption that he was smashed by a stone block while attempting to leave the eruption's second phase, which buried much of the old Roman city under rock and ash. The fatality was not caused by the block's impact, but rather by asphyxiation caused by the volcano's flow. Lava is not produced by all volcanoes. Vesuvius erupted about 2,000 years ago, spewing a massive column of rock and ash. The following day, pyroclastic flows must have raced down the mountain, wiping out vast areas of land and people. So what is a pyroclastic flow? It is a superheated, hurricane-force wind that carries ash and rock and can destroy nearly anything in its path. It's pretty scary, so you better stay clear of its way. They happen when a volcano collapses or boils over, releasing a lethal amount of gas, ash, and rock down the side, propelled by gravity and air movement. One would more than likely die if hit by it. The Pompeian guy, who probably had a limp from a previous bone ailment, was no match for the fast-moving gush of fire and debris The air that poured down into Pompeii included poisonous gases which were searing as hot as 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and his lungs must not have been able to withstand it. The skull was discovered at a lower level of the ground than the man's corpse, possibly because a tunnel that was constructed during the 1740s had crumbled, taking the head with it. A creepy tiny hand. Archaeologists unearthed a creepy child-sized lifelike miniature bronze hand at the Roman fort of Vindolanda near Hadrian's Wall in England. The hand was found near a temple devoted to the god of Jupiter Dolicanus. The cult of Jupiter Dolicanus is shrouded in a mystery, whose practices were further shrouded in secrecy. It died out before the adoption of Christianity in the main region of the empire. The cult was very popular in the Roman army of the 3rd century CE. Researchers are stating the age of the hand to be between 208 and 212 AD. The hand was likely left as an offering after a major invasion of Scotland, in which a huge number of people may have been killed. The 4-inch hand originally had a socket and would have been fixed to a pole, which is now missing. Jupiter Dolicanus was typically depicted holding a thunderbolt in his hand, with an upraised arm signifying his destructive power, according to experts. The open hand also symbolizes protection and well-being. So, what is your take on this? Does it sound creepy or not? Mass child sacrifice. Archaeologists made a shocking discovery in Peru that will send a shiver down your spine. More than 140 children and 200 young llamas were killed in what is believed to be the biggest child sacrifice ever seen in the world. The sacrifice took place 550 years ago in the Chimu Empire. Researchers refer to the ritual as Las Llamas, and it is officially called Huanchaquito Las Llamas. Initially, only 42 skeletons were discovered in 2011, along with the remains of 76 llamas. An archaeologist was excavating a 3,500-year-old temple when the natives alerted him about human remains eroding from nearby coastal dunes. After the excavations were complete, 140 bodies were discovered, along with rope and textile. The gruesome ritual included cutting the chests open and taking the heart apart. The signs of the harrowing incident are still alive in the dislocated ribs of the children and animals. Those sacrificed were all very young, no older than 12. Most of them were buried facing the sea to the west, while the llamas were buried facing the Andes towards the east. Researchers believe that the sacrifice might have been made to appease the natural forces. Based on a layer of mud preserved with the body, scientists inferred that the coast might have been flooded, while rising temperatures may have disrupted the fishing industry. So, did the mass sacrifice work? No. A decade later, the Chimu Empire was taken over by the Incas. Skeletons of twins. A bioarchaeologist says she has discovered the oldest set of confirmed twins during her field research in a Siberian cemetery. The discovery says the exhumed skeletons of a mother and her twins are around 7,700 years old. It says a sad story of a woman who partially delivered one twin in a breech position, which obstructed the birth of the second child. It is impossible to say for sure that there were twins in the past, said Levers, who added that while archaeologists have found babies buried together in the same grave, it doesn't necessarily prove the existence of twins. But finding the twins' bones inside the mother confirms them as the oldest set in the world. The mother, who was between 20 and 25 years old, probably bled to death or died from exhaustion, and was likely unaware that she was carrying twins. This find is the earliest confirmed set of human twins on record. The fact that the first baby came breech was just a death sentence for all three of them. Boxton Man. In the 1920s, the body of a man was discovered in a bog in Boxton, Sweden. He has since been known as the Boxton Man. The man was stuck 3 times on his head and tossed into a peat bog to die. His murderers even impaled him with 3 wooden poles to keep his body from rising up. The water-filled bog preserved his clothes and hair and helped the scientists determine his story. He belonged to the 14th century and was a person of high social status. He must have been between 30 to 35 years old when he died. After extensively studying his skeletal remains, scientists found that the injury on his head was from a blunt weapon like a pole or a hammer. If Boxton Man was really a victim of murder, researchers have come up with 2 main theories regarding the reason for his murder. The first theory is that he had been recruiting soldiers and was killed for that. Another idea suggests that he might have been a tax collector, which ultimately got him murdered. The branches he was impaled with were from a straw roof. Back in the day, the dead were impaled with branches to make sure they couldn't come back to seek revenge. However, some believe that he died of natural causes, and the injuries happened after his death. With all the technology we have today, we can only arrive at an approximate idea of how things might have played out in the past. The truth, however, lies buried with the dead. Thanks for watching. Which discovery did you think was the creepiest? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.